We are going to be playing the French exiles in Kaiserredux. Semi-roleplay, not super hardcore, but certainly roleplayed game I'm going to do for Hearts of Iron. I do have a mod added that allows texts that go all the way up until, I think, the 90s? Yeah, the 90s. We're obviously not going to go that far, but if we go a little bit further than normal, I think it'd be really interesting. I'd like to play up a little bit of the politics if the AI will let us. Obviously, given we're the French exiles, we are the former government of France that was pushed out after the worker uprising in France. We only have Northern African territories where we're really weak, only 24 factories. In many ways, we're really not that strong. All right, let's look at our national spirits. We have anti-communard. After our defeat in the Weltkrieg in 1919, the communards rose up and abolished our cherished republic. Luckily, some of the most important figures of the Republic have immigrated to Algeria, where they plan to organize the counter-revolution. Now that the syndicalist traitors have taken full control of the mainland, we must crush them. We must ensure that eternal France is always free. Then we have Code, de l'Indénat, I'm saying that wrong, remains in place since its creation in 1887, a diverse set of laws and regulations imposed on the native populations of the empire. They enshrine their inferior legal status, beside them being technically French citizens. Collective punishment, a parallel justice system, forced labor, and service in the armed forces, enforced by native elites under the guise of modernization, and the spread of civilization. To say that the indignat has created resentment would be an understatement. However, it has proved to be a sure source of labor for the colonial effort and is supported by many prominent voices in government who argue that maintaining the status quo is necessary to prepare for the reconquest. And then lastly, we have simmering dissent. Years of inaction and political stagnancy have caused many elements within the army and the population to become dissatisfied with the current regime, something hardly helped by Maurice Yanin's repeated blunders. This has extensively played into the hands of both resurgent liberal parties and the far-right leagues. Although it is suppressed, contestation is slowly but surely growing within the French Republic. So really, we're just a really chaotic government in exile ruling in lands where the local people hate us. Prepare for the liberation. The situation in continental Europe is quickly becoming more and more tense, with elections imminent among the communard traitors, whose relations to the Germans are more tense than ever. There is no point in denying that a conflict even worse than the horrors of the Great War is around the corner, and that conflict will be the only chance we ever get to liberate the metropole from syndicalist tyranny. As such, we must review our military capabilities and seek to dissolve the debates within the army. Generally speaking, we are going to build up a bit of a civ base. We start with 8 mills, 2 dockyards, and 14 civs. I don't think anyone will be shocked to know that I'm going to definitely give us a naval focus, but I won't start by building dockyards, don't worry. So we'll build a few more civs. Tech-wise, we are going to work on the basics, obviously. Mechanical engineering, we'll do basic machine tools. We have some good generals, thankfully. Alphonse Yun is very solid. I think we have another really good, like, lower level one. And then for our field marshal, we get de Gaulle later, but for now we'll go with Pétain. We are not making enough resources. That is fully expected. And I'm not going to import anything because we don't have the resources for it. Navally, we have a very solid fleet. It's old. It's very old, but it is relevant. They're mostly Weltkrieg ships. Now, if we refit them, they can be viable, but it's going to be rough. The situation in the French Republic. The Third Republic fell the same way it came to be, in defeat by German arms and facing socialist unrest. As the civil war that followed the Communist Revolution of 1920 eventually came to a close, the government chose exile instead of surrender. Having retreated to Marseille, they embarked from the French Navy towards Algiers, hoping that this temporary situation would soon be resolved, as the newly created Federation of Communes in France would undoubtedly either quickly collapse on itself or be put down by the Boches. Neither happened, and instead a peace treaty was concluded between the German Empire and the Commune, with little to no regard towards the exiled government. The Commune was recognized as the successor to the French Republic by most of the newly German-aligned world, while the exiles remained seen as the ultimate government by those who had fought beside them in the Weltkrieg. But the refugees refused to be cowed. They renewed their claim as the legitimate government of all of France and her empire, and their commitment to the Entente, preparing for any opportunity to strike. However, the aftermath of the exile proved highly unstable, with the remnants of parliament and mainstream parties thrown into chaos by defeat and exile. The great commander, Ferdinand Foch, seized control in a bloodless push, ruled at the head by a thinly veiled junta, until his death in 1929. His shoes were filled with ease by his fellow war hero, Philippe Pétain, the Lion of Verdun. Pétain's rule has, so far, been perceived as less autocratic than his predecessors, with the Marshal willing to delegate to the assembly and civilian politicians when needs be, and choosing to cooperate with the parties of the center-right, as well as the Corpus Croix de Foix. Nevertheless, he alone is the leader of France. The constitution remains suspended and ignored, with the military continuing to dominate both politics and economy, and parliament often sidelined. However, Pétain's premier general, Maurice Yanin, has been less than admirable record of incompetence, and his many blunders may soon catch up to him and his government. As I said, 20 minutes. The circumstances of the revolution to exile have convinced Marshal, Pétain, and a large proportion of the population that only a dynamic and authoritarian rule can save France, at least until the metropole is liberated. However, both far-right royalists and liberals are increasingly dissatisfied with the regime and are slowly becoming restless for change. This is not helped by the perceived incompetence of the premier, Maurice Yanin, who has already endangered the government with his blunders before and may well do so again. Even Pétain's allies of the Croix de Foix and FR are starting to grow impatient with the political stagnation. And de la Roche corporatists are increasingly hindered by internal factionalism, making them hardly the ally they once were. To put it simply, the junta is slowly but surely losing political credibility and is now mainly held together by the prestige of Pétain. The junta did, however, make several attempts to reassert its power, such as temporarily renaming the French Republic the French National State. The notion of state referring to temporary suspension of full democracy, and that of national asserting itself as the only state truly representing the French people, as opposed to the universalist and internationalist charter of the communard government. We can trust the lion. As if this lack of civilian support wasn't enough, trust in the Marshal is starting to erode within the army, the backbone of the regime. Pétain's favoritism towards his protégés has put many in key positions, and though they certainly are competent, many officers are left behind, while others worry this could endanger doctrinal rot. That Pétain is surrounding himself with yes-men. Interestingly, debate is flaring up within the clique between General de Gaulle and Admiral Darien, whose proposals for liberation are starkly different, over how the military should prepare to free the metropole. The most important problem facing the nation, however, is simply its situation in exile. Though in Algeria, officially annexed as part of France as an overseas department in the 19th century, exiles and Pieds Noirs settlers make up a significant part of the population in some major cities and even making up a majority. Overall, Europeans are still a small minority ruling over millions of indigenes, who, despite being considered Frenchmen, are essentially second-class citizens, subject to heavy taxes, forced labor, with rule from Algiers enforced by native elites in the army. Since the defeat in the Valkyrie, the colonial situation is precarious. Unrest is ruthlessly put down. Recent famines were badly managed. Syndicalists and pan-Arab agents spread propaganda against colonial authorities. However, most traditional indigenous elites are still loyal to France, and there exists a growing class of French-educated natives and native war veterans, who despite wanting reform remain loyal. But one thing is clear, if the government is careless, further unrest and perhaps even revolts are bound to happen. Yeah, we have to keep down resistance, which is why the first thing I did was start an intelligence agency. I remember that from last time I played this. Darnan breaks with the Croix de Foix. Princess de la Roche, Catholic corporatist Croix de Foix, a major ally of the junta and the assembly, today suffered a significant setback. The party has long been a broad tent coalition, united mainly by de la Roque's own charisma and by shared distrust of liberal democracy. However, the tensions that have been caused by this have clearly reached a boiling point, with some of the party's hardliners under Joseph Darnan splitting off entirely, to form a new Chevalier de Glaive party. Claiming inspiration from the legionnaires in Romania and seeking to defend French racial purity, and restore French power in Europe, Darnan has notably proclaimed his absolute loyalty to the Pétain government, in what we can only assume is a ploy for influence in the junta. Nevertheless, Darnan's group remains on the extreme fringe, and his radicalism is regarded with suspicion by much of the population. While Pétain's allies in the junta have no interest in working with him, if anything, his split from the Croix de Foix has harmed de la Roche through exposing the divisions of his own party, more than has helped Darnan. National populism got a bit more popular. Edward VIII crowned as King of Great Britain. His Majesty George V, by the grace of God and the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland, and of the British dominions beyond the seas, King Defender of the Faith, Emperor of India, friend of France, our great ally during the Great War and since our exile, as well as a personal friend of Marshal Pétain since the two met on the battlefield 2 decades ago, has died today at 70 years old. Though the situation is unfortunately tense at home given the magnitude of the event, it is important for the Entente that the Lion attends the funeral of George V and the coronation of his son Edward. And more personally for Pétain, it is important to mourn a friend and ally, who like him oversaw the exile of his people after bloody revolutions in their homelands, and like him, was wholeheartedly dedicated to one day come back and retake what is rightfully theirs. And so Marshal Pétain embarks on a special transatlantic flight, ready to honor the memory of a friend, but celebrate a new era of Anglo-French friendship. The king is dead, long live the king. The Lion in Canada. After a 60-hour transatlantic flight, Marshal Pétain arrives in Ottawa, greeted by Prime Minister Mackenzie King and large crowd of Canadians, mostly Quebecois, who see the state visit as a renewal of the Anglo-French cooperation. They then drove to Windsor, where late King Emperor George had asked to be buried. After a grandiose and emotional ceremony where Pétain was finally able to say farewell to a personal friend and ally, he took a tour of Ontario and Quebec, greeted all the way as a friend of the Empire, before meeting with King Edward VIII. In a pre-planned move, the two men shook hands in front of the media of the world, and the new king declared that no matter the struggles the future holds, the French and British nations would always fight side by side in this great crusade against the syndicalist threat. Later on, the two men held a private talk discussing current issues facing the Entente, the policies that both men were planning on undertaking, as well as the inevitable prospect of war. The mutual undying commitment of both nations to each other was, of course, renewed, announcing even stronger bonds within the Entente. Time to return home. The succession to D'Esprit. Over a week is now passed since Louis Franchet d'Esprit retired, and Pétain has still held back on announcing a successor. This is because d'Esprit's retirement was robbed the military of a unifying, respected figure, capable of papering over the growing doctrinal divides, as a younger generation of officers seeks to find solutions to the military's decline. On one side, Generals Charles de Gaulle and his allies are known for their conviction that the nation can, in its current circumstances, only sustain quality of training and equipment. Furthermore, de Gaulle is passionate in his belief that tanks are the future of warfare, and that the army should develop elite armored units which can achieve concentrated, rapid breakthroughs. Opposing de Gaulle's faction is a group of officers centered around Admiral François Doyon and General Maxime Weygand, who follow a more traditional approach that is often more popular among the older generation of officers. Drawing on the traditional French ideal of the citizen soldier, they need for strong naval and air power in order to land in the metropole. They argue for a large army as circumstances allow, alongside a greatly strengthened Navy and Air Force, with the three forces acting in greater coordination. By now, however, the pressure from both factions of the military, from civilian politicians eager to see the military reform one way or another, and from public opinion, has grown too strong for Pétain to procrastinate on. All right, Fosh poll, you guys get to decide. Do we go with de Gaulle and a more quality tank-based military, or do we go for Darlan and go for a more quantity Navy and air-based military? What are we gonna do? De Gaulle it is. Small elite force is what we need. Bring in de Gaulle. Rumors of Mordoc's imminent demise. Jean-Jules Henri Murdoch has long served the armed forces of France, but as the political stage of our exiled regime begins to change its main players as the winds of change blow across our Saharan home, Murdoch has begun, for fear of his own life. Rumors have spread that his enemies within the radical right, within France's left, or that even Algerian natives seek to gut this wounded old man lest he interfere with the coming shift. And so Murdoch has begun to look for options. General Jacques Massu and Armand Hugues, both old allies and confidants of Murdoch, have now worked within the Belgian-German Congo Free State and could prove a safe haven for him should he flee. However, the dark heart of the Dark Continent is fraught with danger and filled with death and disease, especially to outsider colonials who know little of how to live in such a foreign land, as some believe that the German colonial system in Africa is looming towards collapse. Luckily, Murdoch has some experience surviving in Africa due to his time serving in Algeria, both during the 1880s and again during the rise of the Commune in Paris. But the sand dunes of Algeria are a far different beast to tame than the dangerous jungle Eden of the Congo. However, it is not certain that he is in any real danger, for it could just be the paranoia of old age setting in, and the rumors could be entirely false, but the truth is uncertain. What should the aging general do in this trying time? He'll be fine. He's just paranoid. Black Monday. The stock market in Berlin has collapsed, and with it, Germany is already a stagnant economy. If Germany is to retain its hegemonic position, the Black Monday crisis must be addressed. The world is now spiraling into chaos and economic collapse. Everywhere from Ecuador to New Zealand, the reverberations are being felt, and if drastic action is not taken, the world could descend into complete anarchy. The world wonders if Germany can even recover. Oh, we can just directly join the war. Let's do that. We'll send our specialized divisions over there. All right, obviously we want to support our allies in India. We can't have our friends, the British. Shocking news has reached the nation today. Last night, the retired General Henri Marcois was found dead in the Kasbah, having been stabbed repeatedly and left to bleed out in the gutter. Murdoch was a glittering career in the Great War, successfully holding the town of Arras against the Germans in 1914 and becoming deeply influential in the Clemenceau government. However, he became far too indebted to the Tigre for his own good, and with the fall of the Clemenceau government amidst the revolution and Fox coup, his political career collapsed. His military career soon followed, but the general staff increasingly wary of his unorthodox theories. Nonetheless, at the time of his death, He had become a prolific writer, and his fierce defense of Clemenceau has made him a prominent figure among liberals. Already the right-wing press, notably the Croix de Foix, aligned paper Le Flambois, and of course Action Française, are pointing the finger at natives, Jews, socialists, and everything in between. Oh boy. Notably, this cause has been taken up by Joseph Darnand. This is the first major scandal to have broken out since he split from the Croix de Foix, and he already wants to make a success of it, calling in harsh and clear terms for a crackdown on Algerian nationalists. We're going to look deeper. Industrialize the colonies. Our current industry could never hope to sustain a military campaign across the metropole. If we are to have any hope of liberating our brothers and sisters, we must rectify this dire situation and seek to encourage a far greater level of industrial growth across the colonies. Subsidies of a new construction projects in both the Maghreb and sub-Saharan territories will begin to get our industrial capacity back on track. We'll get 4 civs. Pretty nice and very needed. Having taken stock of our military and industrial capacity, we can no longer hide from a simple, harsh fact. As it stands, our economy and army are nowhere near what is required to successfully land in metropole. Clearly. And then defeat the commune. Urgent and drastic reforms are urgently needed, and public pressure on Premier Yanin is reaching a fever pitch. Bertain himself is said to be deeply angered by the findings, demanding that Yanin do something, and possibly growing more sympathetic to the voices within his government that want to see a further consolidation of the junta. De Gaulle, and then we're going to do tanks, so I'm going to start on tank research when we get done with this one. All right, our forces are on the way to assist the Dominion, and we have our air force on the way to support them too. There we go. Bertain's premier, Maurice Yanin, has few redeeming features. He is uncharismatic, unmotivated, incompetent, and prone to political blunders. What the fuck is our military staff? He is, however, loyal. There it is. And it is loyalty that has inspired him to come to the Marshal today with an undesirable, if necessary, proposal, in order to ensure that he has the political capital pushed through the military spending that is needed to get the army into a fit state for liberation. Yanin intends to pay off a large number of the deputies in the assembly. Oh god, bribery, really? Although he knows that such corrupt measures are far from ideal and could cause significant problems of leak, Yanin is certain it is the only way forward in light of growing frustration with his government and abilities. Reluctantly, Bertain can only agree. All right, we need to choose our political operative. We have a seducer, an escape artist, a safecracker, and a commando. We'll go for Thierry Duptit Thouars. I'm gonna butcher all these French names, and I apologize. The scandal breaks. And news that surprised few in the know. Yanin's corruption has today been exposed in all its sordid detail. Elaborate bribes, disturbing threats, even promises to turn a blind eye to blatantly illegal activity in exchange for support. All have been common practices of the Yanin government, and all have been intensely recently as Yanin makes a belated effort to strengthen his hand. Everyone from the staunch liberal Camille Chantemps to Charles Maurras and Charles Darnand have harshly rebuked not only Yanin, but Bertain himself. And although Yanin's own fall from power is now a certainty, some have speculated that the junta itself is on the way out. Merdy. Oh boy. Oh man. Stability loss, political power loss, widespread protests. Bertain, you dumb fuck, why'd you let him do that? Come on, you don't do that. Today the news flashed across the front pages has astonished most. The murderers of Henri Mourquois have been clearly proved as guilty and rounded up. They are, however, a far cry from the Arabs, Jews, or leftists whom Maurras and Darnand had accused. Rather, the guilty men are outwardly respectable white citizens, and among them, crucially, is Henri Charbonneau and Joseph Darnand's own nephew and former member of the Action Française who drifted further to the right and joined more fringe leagues. This connection to the murder has greatly embarrassed Darnand and aroused a great deal of suspicion. Clearly, the circumstances and motives behind Murdoch's death have to be looked at even further. Yanin's resignation. Today, the inevitable came to pass, and after 2 days spent locked away in his office, Maurice Yanin gave a short, regretful speech to a jeering assembly, announcing his immediate resignation. It is clear that Bertain himself had forced him out, threatening if he didn't go quietly, he would lose not only his rank in the army, but his liberty as well. And thus fell Yanin's regime, ineffectual and shambolic to the end. Bertain's next move as he attempts to stabilize the situation is for now unknown, but members of the Croix de Foix, FR, and even AF are all seen meeting with representatives of the junta. Oh boy, we're gonna run out of fuel. We need it for our planes. We're putting in work though. We're really giving them a lot of support here. Our next move. Ever since Yanin resigned, the Republic has been without any prime minister, and the junta has been in chaos, with Bertain forced to take on the daily administrative responsibilities that he has grown used to delegating. Meanwhile, protests supported by everyone from liberals to legionnaires have continued in the streets. We are running out of time to stabilize this situation. As such, two possibilities lie before Pétain. First, as is suggested by many, he could seek to gain the support of civilian politicians through more legitimate means than Yanin had used. This would entail entering into discussions with either François de la Roche, leader of the Croix de Foix and darling of the far right, or Louis Marin, leader of the center-right Federation Republican. Either man would be able to use his political prestige and support base to restore confidence in the regime, but would also demand extensive concessions in exchange for doing so. Something which has inspired some Pétain loyalists to urge the Marshal to not bother taking any politicians. Civilian politics, they argue, is responsible for dragging France into the chaos it currently faces. It is time for Pétain to fully secure the junta's position and bid the assembly to his will. The old Marshal must choose a course of action, but he has little time. Or you're going to declare martial law. Martial law. With the crisis dragging on and his opportunities to form political alliances either exhausted or refused, Marshal Pétain today took the drastic step of declaring martial law in Algiers, citing the ongoing struggle against syndicalism as his formal reason. Of course, this has confused few, and it is obvious that he intends simply to consolidate his own power. Later in the day, a large number of soldiers led by General de Gaulle entered the assembly. Reluctantly unchallenged by the liberals and greeted with cheers by the delegates of the Croix de Foix, they presented a simple bail, declaring full support for Philippe Pétain and recognizing him as both president and prime minister. The motion has adopted near unanimously, and the handful that votes against it were promptly placed under arrest. Now, young soldiers patrol the streets of Algiers, rounding up Arab nationalists as the Kasbah and liberal dissidents in the European quarter. Opposition to Pétain will doubtless fast evaporate as politicians scramble to save their careers and freedom. Although it has taken brute force to secure the junta, and some condemnation may come our way. Vive le Marshal. Alright. Simmering discontent. Now, we are putting down resistance a little bit here. For the most part, in Mali, that's the main area to worry about, so we're doing alright. After much investigation and infiltration by the police, the full shocking truth of Mordauc's death has now become clear. The naval veteran and engineer Eugène de Lançois, who had initially supported the AF before leaving it due to his frustration over Mauras's unwillingness to violently seize power, has formed a deep-running and extremist terrorist organization. Up to now, in secret, de Lançois, Jesus Christ, de Lançois' organization, dubbed La Cagoule, God, I really should not be playing countries like France, by the AF writer Maurice Peugeot, due to the cowls they wear in their initiation rituals. The fuck, man? Seemingly sought to inspire harsher crackdowns against the liberals and Arab nationalists, as well as further radicalization of the French right, by framing leftists or Arab groups for terror attacks, as happened in the case of Mordauc. The group, it is clear, has enjoyed the support of several notable industrialists, more notably the founder of L'Oreal? Whoa, Eugene Schuller, and countless previously respected figures have been implicated in the scandal. Most prominently among these is Joseph Darnand himself, now revealed to be an active member of the organization and directly complicit in the death of the general. Although an attempt has been made to bring him to justice, his home was found abandoned. It is believed that he has fled across the sea to Romania. Terrorist scum. God damn, that's wild. We are going to go ahead and make a thrust around and try to go to Kandahar. All right, let's go ahead and try and push them here. Maghrebi shipbuilding. Without a strong and well-equipped navy, we have no hope of liberating France, and as such, we badly need ships. With this in mind, the government should subsidize shipbuilding in the Mediterranean, coastline of North Africa, and invest further in naval research. Oh, shit. Oh my god, Britain white-pieced. Quite disappointing. Wow. Wow. They backed out of the war. I expected better of Edward VIII, I'm gonna be honest. I expected better. We'll leave our good divisions over in Delhi, in case something happens. Taking advantage of the chaos in Moscow after the assassination of Kerensky, Laver Kornilov and his officers, with the help of combat squads from Boris Savinkov's NRPR, took to the streets of Moscow to fight off leftist organization and trade unionists. After hours of bloody street fighting, Kornilov took full control of Moscow. National rearmament program. We need for military industry is greater than ever, and as such it is now vital that we redouble our investments in arms factories and subsidies for armaments, encouraging both private business and state interests to do their bit in the military economy, and introduce a greater rationing or to serve the resources of the military. We got a research slot too. The League of 8 Provinces is broken up. The war has begun. Ensure the Assembly's loyalty. Civilian politicians can be allowed to undermine national unity and our preparations for liberation no longer. It is time to put a stop to the disloyalty and petty bickering. We must ensure that the civilian politicians of the nation understand their secondary and advisory role to the president. Only then can we decide what to do with their parties. More support, stability, and we get rid of the protests. How are we looking on occupation? It's gone down to everywhere now. Resistance is almost gone most places. Finding parliamentary backers. As we seek to ensure lasting loyalty within the assembly and eventually make the body fully subordinate to the military government, we must deepen our ties with the right-wing parties who can assist us. So far, the parties most friendly towards the junta have been Louis Marine's Federation Republicain and Francois de la Roche's Croix de Foix. The FR, and despite its Catholic and conservative policies, is deeply committed to republicanism and democratic ideals, with the result that the more authoritarian members of Petain's clique distrust it as overly liberal. Nonetheless, Marine has always supported the junta, arguing that it is impossible to seek full democracy in the current circumstances, so doubling down on his support may well lend us legitimacy. On the other hand, de la Roche's party is far less committed to parliamentarism and the republic, but de la Roche has long sought to cultivate a cult of personality, which some fear could challenge Petain's own. Alongside his party's mass membership, a new innovation in French politics which troubles some traditionalists. Nevertheless, we need allies, and due to the rivalry between the two parties, we must settle on one of the two to be our primary ally. We're going to go with de la Roche. Parliament stabilizes. After over a week of intense lobbying and campaigning by Francois de la Roche and his Croix de Foix, with generous support from the junta itself, the assembly has passed a given into the pressure to pass a new law, giving Petain as president of the republic sweeping powers to move against dissidents and to reform the republic. This was largely seen as inevitable, since Petain's loyalists in the army occupied the assembly when martial law was first declared. But it is clear that de la Roche's renewed support for Petain has also gone a long way to legitimize the Marshal's consolidation of power. Louis Marine has already sought to round up support for the recent law, but with Petain having chosen to cooperate with his rival de la Roche instead, he has lost a significant amount of influence. Since his self-coup, Petain has ruled alone as both president and prime minister. However, the old Marshal has never enjoyed day-to-day administration, nor does he have the time at his current age to engage in all matters while preoccupied as both head of state and senior general. As such, he has resolved to delegate his position to a loyal member of the clique in his army and leave ordinary members of state to them, allowing for more capable and efficient government. Officers in the government. As we secure the position of the junta, it is essential that we further fill governmental positions with trustworthy officers who know from their own experience of military life that only discipline and authority yields good results. Furthermore, the officer corps is heavily invested in preserving the junta, lest our rivals instigate or punish them. As such, a government of officers will ensure greater loyalty to Petain than ever. Because that went really well in the past. Absolutely. Charles de Gaulle appointed premier. Austria's at war with Italy. Social Democrats in Austria and nationalist populists in Italy. We've kind of started to work with the Catholics, and we would support Italy to a degree. The powers of the army. Through the rule of Petain, and by extension his many loyalists within the military, the army has essentially come to control national France. For years now, our government has been very much a military junta, but now, with Petain having greatly consolidated his power, his allies are divided, and the extent to which the army's power should be recognized. Many believe that the normal institutions of a republic work fine. We can simply maintain the junta by appointing military men to key positions, as we have done before. However, others argue that the Constitution is an opportunity for a more fundamental step away from civilian politics, and we should formally give broad powers to the institution of the army itself. We're going to give it to the army. Alrighty. We can send one division. We'll send our mountaineers. They're getting pushed pretty hard here. We may not be able to help them much. Try and stop their push here. This is going to be rough. Italy is not ready for this war. Suspend the Constitution. Although our consolidation of power over the last months has been vital for France to be saved, it has hardly been legal. In order to legitimize the continued dictatorship and further free ourselves from divisive civilian politics, we must suspend the Constitution of the Third Republic, giving the Marshal a freer hand to lead France to glory and liberate our brothers and sisters in the metropole. Dude, oh my god, they're holding the line with the socialists. That's where all their troops are. They've got tanks. Petain's speech. In his first major public appearance since martial law was declared, Philippe Petain today declared that the old constitution of the Third Republic, long since discarded anyway, had, at least for the time being, conclusively failed, and that the recent turbulence was all the proof that anyone needed. As such, declaring the Marshal the Constitution shall be suspended, with the military assuming direct control of France, at least until the metropole is liberated and order restored. We can hold at least. My god, we can hold. We've got support, so I'm gonna go for an encirclement here when we get a moment. De la Roche seeks to expand the Croix de Foix. Having greatly aligned himself with the military junta since martial law was declared and done a great deal to stabilize Petain's government, Francois de la Roche is now asking for concessions in return. His Croix de Foix is a thoroughly new force in French politics, as it is the first ever party seeking to enlist a mass membership. with its own paramilitaries, women associations, roof groups, and besides, De La Roche now argues that the government funds to expand his party would further strengthen the Junta's hand. No, we're very wary of him, so we're not going to do that. He's dangerous. They are really pushing our ass here, aren't they? God damn. Look at that defense, though. I'm going for it anyway. We're going to do a risky maneuver here. Aha! We might get pushed back here if we don't get reinforced. Trans-Siberian Railway. The German takeover of Morocco has left our remaining West African colonies largely cut off from Algiers by the Sahara. This caused an inefficient administration. If we were ever invaded, it would lead to severe supply issues for our soldiers, particularly if we can no longer safely travel around the coast. As such, we must begin the construction of a new railway across the desert. Oh, they reinforced. All right, let's resupply. Here in review: 14 countries at war, 7 faction members, 22 civs, 12 mills, 5 dockyards. Fuck, I wish I had more than 1 division. Oh, damn it. Expose the motifs. With the Constitution recently suspended, Keeper of the Seals, Raphael Albert, has completely a promulgation of his Exposé des Motifs, an outline for the new principles of the French state. Albert is a member of the Action Française and one of the Maras's most loyal disciples, but is also a talented author who deeply admires Marshal Pétain. After imposing martial law, Pétain decided to tap Albert as Keeper of the Seals and task him with penning a document to legitimize the new authoritarian regime. Albert's calls for 3 reforms. Firstly, it enumerates the head of state, complete and overall power. Secondly, it adjourns the assembly and ensures that only the head of state can call them to order. Lastly, it confirms 3 principles of the nation that officials must commit themselves to upholding: travail, family, and patrie. The policies of the French national state will revolve around protecting 3 core tenets. Some of our military officers have objected to allowing a civilian politician to draft the powers for a martial administration. Albert has in turn pointed out that he is one of the most committed advocates of strong central authority in Algiers and has espoused some views to the line of Verdun, ones that 2 have agreed to the terms of the Révolution Nationale. For his part, Pétain has long been impressed by Albert and believes involving an Action Française leader in building the new government will be vital for securing their loyalty. Both the Action Française and Croix de Foix have endorsed the document, and Albert has proven to be a competent official, able to hold his own against the critique of the High Command. After a few weeks of deliberation, the Exposé des Motifs has been signed into law by Marshal Pétain and decreed that it will serve as a provisional guiding document, with more amendments promised to follow.